saying good day or good morning. We say good Yom Tov. Today is Hey Tevis, the 5th of Tevis, the day when the victory of the Sforim of the previous Rebbe's library and all that was entailed together with it. A very, very special day, a day of miracles, the Rebbe himself said. Without elaborating, it's a very, very special day in the life of Chabad and the Rebbe's leadership. We have to just do what the Rebbe says that this day represents. Sforim are to be learned from. Today we have to make strong resolutions to learn more Torah and also to enlarge our libraries. We have to buy Sforim today. As much as we have access to Sforim online, and actually a few days ago I got somehow popped up that Hebrew Books has now an app, and who knows how many thousands of Sforim, but nevertheless we have to have also what's called today the hard copies, and we have to learn what the Sforim teach us, and so therefore it is very significant and auspicious that we are starting Yarchei Kallah today on the day of Hey Tevis, and we have a very special guest. He can tell us a bit about who he is. His bio was sent around already weeks ago. A very, very colorful personality, as we have already seen in the past few minutes. Okay? And he can speak for himself. Even though we don't have a mic for right now, he doesn't need it at the moment. So we welcome Rabbi Yechiel Krisch from Monsey, New York. Bruchim Aboim and Aslach Rabim B'Floga. And once again, I'll mention it again later by the lecture. I every year mention that the first time I was involved in Yarchei Kallah, I believe it was around 1990 or so. And I asked the Rebbe for his blessings, for his bracha. And I actually had a bit of chutzpah to ask the Rebbe for a bracha, for Atzlocha Mufloga, outstanding success. And we merited for the Yarchei Kallah. And we merited the Rebbe added, not only did he give his bracha for outstanding success, he added the word batoil in everything. And then the one line that the Rebbe said, which is so important and significant, the Godol schools Talmud Torah the Rabbin. We have to print more, by the way. Let's see, we have to print more. The Godol schools Talmud Torah the Rabbin. Great is the merit of communal Torah learning. And we add to that especially at holiday time. Everybody could be going and doing holiday things. But everybody's here because we know the importance of learning Torah and communal learning Torah. It's a great merit. May this merit stand by us, all of us. We also put on the flyer that this program of Yarchei Kallah this year is dedicated to the holy memory of the Kedoshim of Sydney. Hashem Yikum Domam, may Hashem avenge their blood, and also for the poor Shlema of all those injured. And yesterday I went to visit, together with Rabbi Krisch, because we stopped off in Sydney on the way for that purpose. The visit, Rabbi Krisch was some months ago at the Chabad house of Rabbi Yossi Lazarov, whose son is lying in the hospital. We went to visit others, and they need a big refuah shlema.
Amen.
So, and I'm sure everybody is adding. We told them that we are davening and saying more healing and giving more stock, and it means so much to them. And so therefore, may this chus of Talmud Torah the Rabbin bring them a refuah shlema kreva and the end to all of negative things. Rabbi Krisch.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi. I think I'll come over here, just so that we're in the center, and so that I'm directly into the blue light. Fantastic. Is that a camera? It's just there to highlight me on the back. Shadow puppets? You see, where I come from, it's a dog. Here, it's a dingo. I understand the local culture. All right. As the Rabbi said, first of all, I'm Yechiel Krisch. Hi, or good day, as they say. I'm getting used to the local parlance. I switched to dingos. I say good day. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Rabbi. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is it's kind of incredible. And it's a lot more people than the rabbi. The rabbi said to expect the first one in the morning to be like, 3 people sort of sleepy in the corner, and it's everybody. He did not say that. He said fewer. He said fewer, to be fair. But no, I did. Obviously, if we'd expected such a large crowd, you would all have handouts. So, though, this is incredible. Thank you all so much for being here. Please continue to stress our printers. We appreciate it. Everybody appreciates it, right? Okay. I don't want to spend any time on my bio. It's hanging up on all of the shuls. Suffice to say, how do I do this quickly? I'm a rabbi and I'm a scientist. Obviously, I'm a rabbi first. I'm a Jew first. What I do for a living is science. My training's in biomedicine. I work at the Rockefeller University in Manhattan, where I manage 70 biomedical labs. That is what I do for Parnasa, I suppose. Most of my time is spent, thank God, teaching Torah. I get to travel the entire world talking about Torah and mitzvahs, specifically about science and Torah, which is something we're going to do a little later. But thank God, one of my major areas of focus these past few years has been the Rebbe's letters, focusing on what the Rebbe says and trying to figure out from his letters and his sichas and his enormous volume of work what he actually thinks and how we should be viewing the world, what I like to call the Rebbe's shita, the Rebbe's position on things. That's tricky to figure out, because as you probably know, if you look at any one letter from the Rebbe, it's written to that individual in that time and in that place, which means making broad generalizations about the Rebbe based on a couple things he's written is dangerous business. Because of this, whenever we do one of these sorts of classes, they're going to have a ton of sources all pointing in the same direction. That's how we make sure that we're generally safe. So the idea in the morning, at least, every one of the morning classes that we're going to do throughout the Yarchei Kallah is that we're going to take one really interesting, I hope really interesting, subject and look at what the Rebbe's shita is in this subject. Very narrowly, what does the Rebbe have to say about it? For some of these, we're going to expand upon them later. Rabbi, I don't remember what day of the week, but one of these days of the week we have a reincarnation lecture coming up, right? Is that, do you remember what day? Whatever, it's late, it's next week. At some point, and there we're going to cover reincarnation itself as a topic in Torah, of course with the Rebbe, but as a full topic. Here, today, our job is to figure out what the Rebbe has to say about reincarnation. That is the Rebbe's position. Among the many good reasons to do this is, as the Rabbi mentioned earlier, today is Hey Tevis, Good Yom Tov. Today is Hey Tevis. And on Hey Tevis, although it is the day that we celebrate the victory where we got our books back, it really is not a day about how we have a victory, we got our books back. The Rebbe, in every one of his talks about this special day, does not emphasize the history of what happened. He instead emphasizes the idea behind what happened. The idea behind what happened is that in the heavens there was a claim that perhaps we are not sufficiently attached to our Rebbe and his Torah, and we're not sufficiently attached to the leaders of the generation, not sufficiently attached to Chassidus. And when the Sfarim were released, when the books were released and we got them back, this was a voice in heaven declaring as one, in one loud sound, that the Jewish people are indeed connected to the Rebbe, and the Jewish people are indeed able to study and willing to study the works of the Rebbe, which means the best way to celebrate Hey Tevis is to figure out what the Rebbe has to say about stuff. This is the way to celebrate the day, at least as far as I'm concerned. So in celebration of Hey Tevis, that's my entire introduction. I have a bunch of letters for you. They're all on reincarnation. And we want to figure out whether we believe in reincarnation in the first place, Gilgulim as it's called in Hebrew. I should define it, I assume. I guess, looking around the room, I assume you know what we're talking about. But just very quickly to define our terms. Oh, thank God. Saved my eyes. Baruch Hashem. Reincarnation, I always talk this fast. I'm going to slow down a little, but not much. I'm conscious of it. All right. Reincarnation is the idea that you've been here before. And even if you haven't been here before, you might be here again after this. That is that one life is not enough to finish everything a Jew has to do in this world. That a Jew, and according to some opinions, non-Jews as well, will live and die multiple times. Their soul will be recycled into new bodies, and every time their soul comes back, it is there to complete a mission that it did not complete up until then. The central idea of Gilgulim, of reincarnation, is that every single Jew at some point is going to have to do all 613 mitzvahs. That is difficult, if not impossible, to do in just one lifetime, and therefore you keep coming back again and again and again until you nail it. Now, we are on our final reincarnations because Mashiach is coming before the end of this lecture, and there won't be any more after that. You could say amen to that. That's acceptable. Amen. We're expecting Mashiach imminently. However, the conventional wisdom among the Mekubalim, something echoed by the Rebbe in many places, is that we have mostly been here before, and in Kabbalah it looks like we've been here 3 or 4 times, most of the people in this room. So most of the people in this room have been here 3 or 4 times already. That's the idea of reincarnation. Now we just want to figure out what the Rebbe has to say about it. That's our simple job for today. I don't see any reason why this has to be a lecture where I scream at you the whole time. Rabbi, we're hoping for something a little more informal, learning, right? Do you think we should make people read? The Rabbi doesn't want you. People came to hear me talk, not them talk, right? All right. So I have here in front of you In each case, you have the original language of the Rebbe. In case you want to check my work, these translations are mine. Like 2 days ago, the Rabbi asked me to put these into a written form properly for handouts because the printer was leaving at a certain time. So I stayed up very late and just translated all of these myself, which means there could be mistakes. So do try to catch me in the Hebrew. If you find a problem, let me know. First of all, first letter I have on your page is do we believe? Yes. I hope so. Are there any more? I need one so I know where we are, but otherwise I guess look on with a friend. I believe starting tomorrow we'll have more, right, Rabbi? Be'ezras Hashem Yisparach V'Yisala, we're going to find more. I'll try to keep it lightly text-based because, my father lectures, and something my father always tells me is that if you give people stuff to look at, they'll look at it instead of you, which I think spares you the horror of having to look at me. So I think I'm doing you a favor. I know what I look like. But I do understand that, those of you who don't have papers, you'll just pay more attention to what's happening. It's probably a better deal, right? Okay. So our first question is, do we believe in this at all? I think I'm going to do a little reading. I have a letter in front of you. This letter is from the year Tavshin Chaf Daled, which is 1964. And here the Rebbe writes, I'm responding to your letter from 7:10 or 10:7, I don't know what order he did it in, regarding that which is brought up in several books on the subject of the reincarnation of souls. So this person wrote to the Rebbe and said, I'd like to know whether we believe in reincarnation. It's brought in some holy books. It's certainly in some books of Kabbalah. In other places, it's pushed back against. In other places, it's mentioned a little bit less. He wants to know what we think. And before we go any further in the letter, I do want to give you some background. I hope you'll forgive me. I keep my notes on my phone. I'm not like texting and driving here, where I'm not texting while I'm talking to you, but I will be looking at my phone because it's where I have my notes. In Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, we have no mention whatsoever of the idea of Gilgulim, of the idea of reincarnation. It doesn't show up in Tanakh, which is suspicious. We also do not have it in the Mishnah, the primary text of the oral Torah. We also do not have it in the Gemara, the larger extrapolation of the oral Torah, which means in our primary texts of the revealed aspects of the Torah, we do not have any mention of Gilgulim. We certainly have commentaries that read it into the verses sort of backwards, and drush inside perhaps at the deeper levels of interpretation, but there is no place in Tanakh or in Mishnah or in Gemara that specifically says people come back again and again to rectify their problem. I will clarify. We have absolutely in Tanakh, in Mishnah, and in Gemara, the idea of Tchias HaMesim, that when Mashiach comes, the dead come back to life. But the idea that you get more than one shot at life, that is not at all in Tanakh, Mishnah, and Gemara. We do have it fairly early in our mentions, though, in Jewish history. We have it in the Sefer HaBahir. The Sefer HaBahir is a Kabbalah book that I believe has been translated into English. Every time they take these very deep Kabbalah books and translate them into English, I'm afraid there's going to be like a lightning storm somewhere and someone's going to get hit. But somebody translated the Sefer HaBahir, which seems dangerous to me, but go for it if you're interested. That book is attributed to Nechunya ben Akana, who was a Tana, who was one of the authors of the Mishnah. So we do have Mishnah authors writing Kabbalah books, and he mentions Gilgulim specifically in the Sefer HaBahir. You have it in Midrashim. Midrashim are attributed to various Tanaim and Amoraim, the Medrash Rabbah, attributed to Rabbah, etc., Tanchuma, to Rabbi Tanchum. So we have it mentioned by the authors of the Mishnah and by the authors of the Gemara. They mention it in their individual works, but Gilgulim is not actually brought up in our conventional Talmud. So there's room to say, perhaps, that there's, some iffiness around it, some back and forth over whether we hold of it, exactly how much we hold of it. It's a reasonable question. What this person's asking is reasonable. They write to the Rebbe saying, I don't know if we really believe in Gilgulim, and I think the reason why they're asking it is, in Tanakh and in Mishnah and Gemara, you don't have it. Whereas you absolutely have it in Kabbalah books, you absolutely have it in books that are attributed to the writers of the Mishnah, but not in the mainstream texts. If you look in the Rishonim, that is the first generation of medieval commentaries living from around the year 1000 until around the year 1600, you have a lot of mention of reincarnation, a lot of mention of Gilgulim. The Ramban, Nachmanides, he mentions it at some length. You have it in the Yarchei, which is a classic commentary on Chumash. You have it in the Rekanti, you have it in Rabbeinu Bechaya. I just have lists here. Among the later scholars, it runs the gamut. You have it from the Baal Shem Tov and obviously in works of Chassidus, but you know where else you have reincarnation really stressed a lot? In the works of the Vilna Gaon. You might know the Vilna Gaon as being, first of all, one of the great leaders and great geniuses of Jewish history, but also, importantly for our discussion, one of the great opponents of Chassidus, one of the great opponents of the Hasidic ideology, of the Hasidic philosophy that was espoused by the Baal Shem Tov. And despite the fact that the Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe, the progenitor of Chabad, disagreed on many fundamental points, one thing they did not disagree on was the idea of Gilgulim. So we see that it becomes more mainstream as time goes on. In any event, this person writes to the Rebbe, I'm not sure we hold of it, what do you think? So he says here, in response to your letter, regarding that which is brought up in several books on the subject of the reincarnation of souls, specifically and at length in the works of the Arizal, who obviously mentions it, and in the approach of Teres Chassidus in this matter. Okay, now the Rebbe answers. The concept of reincarnation is found in several of our holy books, even prior to the Arizal, as we've just listed, right? Although the authority of the Arizal alone is sufficient and more. I like that sentence. The Rebbe is saying, look, I can back this up. I can show you that if you know how to read Tanakh properly, you're going to find Gilgulim in there. And I can show you that in books of Kabbalah, going back to the Tanoim, going back to the very early Mishnah commentaries, we absolutely have evidence that the Jewish people believe in reincarnation. But the truth is, the Arizal said this sometime around the 1600s, and that's good enough for me, and it should be good enough for you. That's what that line means from the Rebbe. The Arizal is a primary source. Rav Yitzchak Luria, who lived in Tzfat and created Lurianic Kabbalah, which is the form of Kabbalah that is essentially universally practiced today. Anybody who studies Kabbalah nowadays is studying it through the lens of the Arizal. The Arizal in other places the Rebbe refers to as the final word on Kabbalah, similar to the way that Rav Yosef Cairo is the final word on Jewish law. The same way that there were all these big ideas about what we should do practically that all got distilled down into the final form of the Shulchan Aruch, and that nowadays defying the Shulchan Aruch in reference and deference to some early commentary would be unthinkable. Similarly, there were big ideas about Kabbalah. They were all whittled down into sort of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law of Kabbalah, which was written by the Arizal, and anybody trying to, in deference to some earlier opinion, lean on something that's non-Lurianic is not acceptable nowadays. In any event, the Arizal, as far as the Rebbe is concerned, is good enough. However, it does go back further. The Rebbe continues. It is understood that this subject is accepted within Teres HaChasidus and also by the Vilna Gaon and his students, which means all sides agree, despite their opposition to Teres HaChasidus as previously mentioned. Nevertheless, this matter was accepted. Okay, although certain Jewish philosophers in the Middle Ages did not accept this idea for various reasons, this is not the place to specify those reasons. The Rebbe does point out that there were some Jewish scholars of enormous stature who pushed back against the idea of Gilgulim. The most famous one is Rav Sadia Gaon. In Emunas V'Deos, Rav Sadia Gaon, that would be before the medieval time. That's in the time of the Gaonim, when Judaism was essentially centralized in what is nowadays, I guess, Iraq and Iran, in Psura and Pumbedisa, the great academies, right after the destruction of the Second Temple. Rav Sadia Gaon, in his book Emunas V'Deos, he pushes back hard against the idea of reincarnation. He doesn't like it very much. His major opposition is the idea that people can reincarnate into animals. He's very, very, very disturbed by this. He says the human soul is specifically for humans. It doesn't go into animals at all. Why would that make any sense? And he pushes back against it. As the Rebbe says here, and as I'm going to echo, here is not the place to litigate this, because very clearly it is a big idea in Judaism. Very clearly it's in our primary sources. Very clearly we hold of reincarnation. So what we have from the Rebbe initially is just a letter affirming that this is for us. Reincarnation is not a non-Jewish concept. It is a Jewish concept. The fact that non-Jews have it is either because a broken clock is right twice a day or they stole it from us. There are only two ways non-Jews could arrive at the truth, right? The only two ways they could arrive at the truth is by simple guesswork or by borrowing from the truth. So they got it. They do have it. It's in other religions, lahavdil, but it is originally ours. God has it. It's real. It's something that we've. And you know what? You know what's real? You've been through it. I've been here more than once. I'm quite convinced I've been here more than once. Why would I be the exception to the general rule? Yeah. All right. I want to move on to the next letter. In case you're wondering what you were last time, I'm not going to tell you. But if you want to know what you were at least once before, I can tell you. I can tell you what everybody in this room was at least once before. Remember, we've been here a few times, right? So we've been here a few times. I can't tell you what you were, I don't know, last incarnation. But I can tell you what one of your first ones was. And the reason why I can tell you what one of your first ones was is because the Rebbe reveals it in a sikha. So I have here a talk, excuse me, he has it here in a letter, but it's also in a sikha. But here I brought the letter because we're doing letters. So here you have it in a letter. The Rebbe says, and to mention that which is brought in the books of Kabbalah, that the generation living in the days immediately before Mashiach. Now, that is us, yes? We should all agree that that is us. We are the generation living in the days immediately preceding Mashiach. If you look at the world and don't see that, open your eyes wider. We are absolutely living in the generation that is immediately preceding the coming of Mashiach. Now, it is brought in many books of Kabbalah that the generation living in the days immediately before Mashiach is a reincarnation of the generation that left Egypt. So we saw the splitting of the sea. We were the people who saw us leave Egypt. We saw the Maccas. We saw the plagues. We were the ones who walked through the desert. We were there. Now, I don't know what we've done in between. We've probably been back since then. It's been a long Jewish history, and I assume we've been there for a good deal of it. However, we are the generation that left Egypt. And how do I know? Because we are the generation that is in the generation immediately before the coming of Mashiach. So I can tell you where you've been at least once before. I think we'll probably save questions to the end unless it's just a simple clarification point. You want to do a simple...
How do we console that with differential populations?
Huh?
How do you reconcile that?
I will answer that now because it's I think a basic understanding question that I have to answer. It's a smart question. The question was, how do we reconcile the fact that there are vastly different populations? There were 600,000 men of fighting age. So let's say 1.5 million-ish Jews in the entire world when we left Egypt. Now there is, thank God, something like 14 million. Am I right? I think 6 million, like 2 million in between, yeah? 14, 15 million, yeah? Okay, about 14 million now. That is a different number. I told you guys earlier over in this section, I'm in biology, not math. I don't do math, but I do know that 14 is not the same as 1.5. That much I can do. So the question was, how do we reconcile that? And this answer is brought in many Kabbalistic books and also mentioned in Chassidus and a bunch of places, that the root souls of the Jewish people were 600,000. And as a matter of fact, the root soul of humanity is the soul of Adam, and the root soul of all men is Adam, and the root soul of all women is Eve. That we have root souls. Over time, these souls break into sub-sparks that are parts of the greater whole, which means that we are all sparks that broke off of the 600,000 that left Egypt. We could, in this room, all be from the same spark that was one person last time in Egypt. So meaning one soul that was in Egypt, that saw the exodus from Egypt and that saw the splitting of the sea, could have split into easily 100, 200, 300 different souls that are now what we have in front of us right now. So you might be just part of one of these 600,000, but that's how it works. It works by soul splitting, spark splitting. The details of how this works in Kabbalah, if this is confusing or if this is disturbing or if this is just not sitting right, we are going to discuss at length in our proper reincarnation class. Today we're only focusing on the Rebbe's opinion, but you're right. Here I think we needed to clarify that point. Is that okay? Yeah. I want to move on. Okay. This is a letter that I think objectively I shouldn't have included in the pamphlet, which is the best way to make people read it, right? I remember when I was in the 8th grade, there was a section of Talmud that we were studying, a section of Gemara, and our Rebbe said this is not appropriate for 8th graders, and he skipped those 2 pages. The 8th grade class never knew a piece of Gemara as well as those 2 pages. We ran to the study hall, flipped it open. We were calling rabbis, please explain this to us. So if you want people not to read something, tell them that they shouldn't read it. I'm not sure I should have included this letter, but since it's on the page, and since I already said it, may as well bring it out in the open. I think when we were in Crown Heights together, I mentioned this letter at the Kinnis. I think this is one I mentioned at the Kinnis. This is my second time publicizing a letter that I shouldn't publicize. But it's in Igris. It's in the Rebbe's letters. This letter, somebody writes to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I've written you on several occasions, and I keep thinking about killing myself. I think maybe I should do it. And he keeps writing to the Rebbe that he wants to kill himself. And every time this person writes to the Rebbe that he wants to commit suicide, Rahman al-Litzlan, the Rebbe writes back, don't. And every time he writes expecting the answer to change, which is what you get from this letter. It's very clear that this person has written to the Rebbe multiple times and been told no multiple times. And one thing I want to say before we do read this letter together is that people who are in mental health crisis, first of all, this is something that nowadays we recognize as being a disease, as being a neurological disease. This is my field, as being a neurological disease. This is not in, 99.999% of cases, a decision someone makes to be in this sort of state. This is something that is as unpredictable or as unstoppable as Rahman al-Litzlan cancer or any other disease. A person gets sick, and one of the sicknesses that happens is it gets in their head this idea of suicidal ideation, where they want to hurt themselves or Rahman al-Litzlan kill themselves. This is not their fault. And therefore, it needs to be taken with an incredible amount of sensitivity. If, God forbid, anybody in this room has ever felt that way or is currently feeling that way, and you'd be surprised, unfortunately, how common this disease is, it is very important to seek help, absolutely. People love you and will take care of you. This is an important thing to say. It's also important to say that the Rebbe's answer here is not one that I would suggest saying to anybody else. This answer that the Rebbe is going to give to this person with particular suicidal ideation is an answer that the Rebbe knew, because the Rebbe knew this person. The Rebbe is the collective soul of the Jewish people. He knew that this would land for this individual. This is a particularly harsh letter. Please do not use this on somebody who's suffering, unless you know them well enough to know that this is what's going to land, and that's an incredible responsibility. The Rebbe can say this. I don't know that anybody else can say this. For us, it's going to serve a purpose for our discussion of reincarnation, but as advice for how to respond to suicide and suicide ideation, this is not the way to go. I was speaking at one of these conferences one time. Because I have the science title around my name, anybody who's even vaguely in science comes up to me and gives me their version of science. It's one of the reasons I don't like telling people what I do for a living, because everybody else's version of science is wrong. Only mine's right. You know how scientists go. I don't want to hear everybody else's. I'm just kidding. A little bit. I'm not really kidding. I'm not kidding that much. And so this therapist comes up to me, and the therapist says, you and I are colleagues. We're in the same field. And I go, yeah, sure we are. And I'm just kidding. I said, we're in the same field. Yeah, okay, we're in the same field. And he says, well, I also am somebody who studies the Rebbe's Torah, and I'm somebody who does therapy, and I've drawn from the Rebbe's Torah a lot of advice in my therapy with my clients. I said, oh, that's beautiful. Can you give me an example? He says, absolutely. And he quotes this letter. He says, this is what I tell people who are having suicidal ideation. I said, then I think you probably should stop practicing. It's important to understand that the main thing that Rebbe is doing in his letters is looking into the soul of the asker and giving them the answer that works for them. That's the thing I think therapists should be taking from letters, and educators and parents. That when you answer a question, you have to answer the person. That you can't answer the question directly and hope that will get rid of the problem, that the person needs to be taken into consideration. The empathy is, I think, what therapists and parents and educators should be drawing from the Rebbe's letters. There's an enormous amount of empathy here. Every time the Rebbe talks to somebody, he puts himself in their shoes, and he doesn't have to do that because he's part of them. We're all one Jewish people. But a tzaddik sees that clearly. And that's why these answers work for these individuals. That's the lesson I hope therapists take from these sorts of letters, not word for word what to say. With that significant introduction, let's read the letter. Okay, the Rebbe says, number one, I'm astonished you're asking my opinion regarding what to do and how to conduct yourself when I've already written you several times expressing my view on this matter and it remains just as firm. Every time you ask, I say don't kill yourself. I'm not going to change. Okay, that part you can tell people. As for what, that part's okay. As for what you write, that you must do so and the like, that you feel the need to hurt yourself, Rahman al-Islam. It's understood that this is entirely untrue. The Rebbe says, first of all, you don't have to do it. You think you have to, you're wrong. You don't have to. No Jew is ever compelled, God forbid, to act contrary to the will of the Creator. May he be blessed. By the way, this is also very good advice. One of the diseases of, I think, Western society in general. I don't think Western society has that many diseases. I'm quite happy with, obviously, it's gullus. We're waiting for geula. We're waiting for redemption. But as far as societies go, I think we've done a lot worse than Western. It's a pretty good society as far as non-Jewish exile societies go. One of the major problems with Western society, at least in recent years, though, has been that we have taken just about everything negative about ourselves and turned it into an identity that needs to be protected. That is a big idea now, that if I have a negative feeling, which is self-destructive, that's not a negative feeling that's self-destructive that needs to be tamped down. That's something to celebrate. That's who I really am. So somebody writes to the Rebbe saying, I feel that I need to hurt myself. The Rebbe says back, that's a feeling. That's not you. A Jew is what you are. You're a Jew, and a Jew never has to go against the will of the Creator. You never have to if something feels inherently mine, let's talk the most classic case, marrying a non-Jew, Rahman al-Islam, marrying a non-Jew. Somebody will say to the Rabbi, but I'm in love. This is who my heart wants. I'm following my heart. Says the Rebbe and says authentic Judaism back, yeah, but you don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to follow everything you feel. This is a big idea in Judaism that has been completely papered over by, I think, modern Western civilization. The idea here is that what you feel is what you are, and the idea in Judaism is what you feel is sometimes what you are, and sometimes toxic to what you are, and you need some guidance that starts in the head and doesn't start in here, and some guidance above that starts with a general submission to God Almighty and His Torah. That's who I am. Anyway, so the Rebbe says, you think you have to do it? No, you don't. No Jew has ever been compelled, God forbid, to act contrary to the will of the Creator. May he be blessed. It's not possible that a Jew can be forced by circumstance to act against the will of God. It's not possible. Moreover, there would be no purpose in such a trial. So the Rebbe is saying, if you do this, Rahman al-Islam, the person hurts themselves, the person ends their life, there would be no purpose. This is the part that's controversial. And I don't mean controversial. I hate to keep on circling back, but it's a letter that needs to be done properly. It's not controversial that the Rebbe said this to this person. This is the part that I wouldn't repeat to somebody suffering unless you know them very well. The Rebbe says, there would be no purpose in such a trial. Doing it wouldn't help. For as long as the soul has not fulfilled the task commanded to it by the giver of the Torah, it will return in reincarnation after reincarnation. Says the Rebbe, you take yourself off the board, God's putting you back on. You can't get out of this. It's not, the Rebbe is saying, you don't, first of all, the Rebbe is saying don't try. But if you did try, you'd find yourself right back where you started again. There is no opting out of life. God brings you back till He's done with you. You can't get out of this. Not only that, it gets harder. Only that now, having caused additional damage through doing the sin of ending one's life, the next reincarnation would be more difficult. Says the Rebbe, you think it's bad now, you just wait till you see what He sends you back as. Now, I will remind you, I met a therapist who told me he uses this in therapy. Don't go to him. We should not expound upon painful matters, says the Rebbe. Let's not talk about this at length. Let's not spend a lot of time on this. It hurts. It is also clear that all the reasons and justifications you write are claims of the other side. Powerful, which have no basis in reality, double powerful. The Rebbe is saying, if you have a toxic idea in your head that could truly hurt you, it's not you, it's your Yetzer Hara. And welcome to the club, everybody has a Yetzer Hara. Not the Rebbe, but other people. I have one, you have one, a lot of people in the room have one. A Yetzer Hara is nothing more than a Yetzer Hara. It's the evil inclination. It's not you, it's the thing trying to mess you up. So while a person's sitting there saying, it's me who feels I need to do something forbidden, says the Rebbe, no, that's not you. You are in danger, and your evil inclination is trying to convince you that the real you wants to do something horrible. But for our purposes anyway, may it be God's will that you recognize the truth, which is good both spiritually and materially. The Rebbe gives him a bracha. We see here that there is a downside to reincarnation, or at least sort of a harsh side to reincarnation. God does not stop bringing people back until He's done with them. And if a person has more things to fix because they mess up in this world, then their next reincarnation, their next incarnation becomes more difficult. Which means that one of our major ideas while we're in this world is to not come back, which I think is, lahavdil, contrary to some other religions and their ideas about reincarnation. Our big plan is to not come back again. That's our goal. Our goal is to bring Mashiach, first of all, and to not die. Second of all, for prior generations, in which that was not possible because the prior generations were not the generation of Mashiach, their goal was to do so much good in this lifetime and so little bad in this lifetime that they don't have to come back again. That's the goal. And if somebody doesn't do a good job this time around, God's not giving up on them. God's going to bring them back again and again and again. In some ways, that's beautiful. In other ways, it is a wake-up call that we need to live our lives as well as we can right now, because there is no way out besides forward. The only way out is forward. All right. Harsh. We're going to move on to something a little more fun, I hope. All right. You see the page in front of you now? This one that says hints to your past lives? I know this is what you came for. This is what everybody really wants. What everybody really wants is to know what they were last time. I don't think any of you were animals or plants or rocks. I don't think so. Based on the Arizal, which is something we'll talk about during the regular lecture, I'm pretty sure last time we were all humans. I've met some people who this time are rocks, but I haven't met anybody who last time who was a rock. This is a very special letter. This letter is written in the year 1952. And somebody writes to the Rebbe saying that, I believe it's a man. Shalom Ubracha. You guys want to hear a really cool Rebbe letter tip in case you don't know it? I'm sure that the people who are familiar with the Rebbe's letters know this already. But just a couple fun things you discover in Rebbe letters. One of them is that every time the Rebbe writes to a man, he writes Shalom Ubracha. And every time he writes to a woman, he writes Bracha V'Shalom. Which means that if you ever want to know offhand what gender he's writing to, just look at the top line. The other important thing to know about letters, the other pro tip, there's a bunch of them, big pro tip. If there ever is a PS, a nun beis at the bottom of a letter, that's where the action is. The action's always in the PS. I saw a letter once where the Rebbe writes to somebody, Mazel Tov on the birth of a child or a bar mitzvah, I can't remember what it was. He writes Mazel Tov on some special occasion, maybe you have a lot of bracha and atzlacha, and then there's a nice big gap and he writes PS. And he opens the PS by saying, I know you're going to want to share your letter of blessing with your friends, so I put the simple stuff with the letter of blessing on page 1. We have to talk though, here's the PS. And the PS was harsh. So the Rebbe puts some things in the PS that he knows you might not want to publicize because people separate the PS from the rest of the letter when they're hanging things on the wall. So the PS is where the action is. Always look in PSs. That is not a topic for today because I have no PSs. This was just me informing you about a fun fact about Rebbe letters. This person writes to the Rebbe and says, I can't get along with my wife, she's the worst. I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but I suspect that's more or less what he said. Mostly I suspect that because of the sheer number of phone calls I get from people telling me they can't get along with their spouse because their spouse is the worst. So unfortunately, this is a major problem. People have shalom bayis issues. God should protect them from these things. We should pray for shalom bayis. It's very, very important. Listen now, the Rebbe addresses this though. The Rebbe says, in the area of shalom bayis, peace in the home, specifically in this matter, it's urgent that you invest additional effort. So part 1, person writes to the Rebbe saying, my wife is the worst, and the Rebbe goes back, maybe you should try a little harder. It's advice to women and to men, by the way. Part of, obviously, they're case by case. There are relationships that need something deeper than this. There are, God forbid, unfortunately, some relationships that are not tenable. However, in most cases of two people disagreeing, step 1 is to look in the mirror and see, could I try harder? And the Rebbe is telling this person, you could try harder. So number 1, you need to invest additional effort. For from the many challenges in this area, it's clear that this is among the sparks that you must elevate in this world. Did you catch that? I'm going to say it again more slowly. Specifically in this matter, it's urgent you invest additional effort. Why? For from the many challenges in this area, because you are so challenged by shalom bayis, this tells me, says the Rebbe, that this is among the sparks that you must elevate in this world. A person can, from their challenges, figure out what their job is in this world. So a person who's having shalom bayis problems, that means that their job in life is to have good shalom bayis. A person who struggles with kosher food, their job in this world is to say no to non-kosher food. A person who struggles in this world with lashon hara, with speaking inappropriately about other people, they also, that's their job in this world. That we should see our struggles as being hints toward our purpose in life, and the Rebbe expands upon this. But just in the first 2 lines, somebody writes to the Rebbe saying, I can't stand my wife, we're fighting all the time. The Rebbe says back, fixing that is why you were born. It is understood from the writings of the Arizal and the explanations of Chassidus that with the exception of certain individuals, the souls of this generation will be present in this world and return for reincarnation. We talked about this earlier, but proof if you wanted it. It's brought that almost everybody who's alive today has been here before. Their primary reason for returning is to repair that which was lacking in their fulfillment of the 613 mitzvahs in their previous incarnations. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. Something didn't go perfectly last time. Here we are. Nevertheless, it is understood that they are obligated in all 613 mitzvahs, even if some of them were not lacking previously, which means that if you were to find out that in your last life you nailed it when it came to kashrus, but you really messed up Shabbos, that doesn't mean you can eat treif and keep Shabbos and call it a deal this time. You got to do a good job in all lives. The difference is that with regard to those mitzvahs that were not lacking in previous incarnation, the evil inclination does not oppose them strongly, only to the extent necessary to allow free choice, since these areas were already rectified previously. Let me unpack that for you for a second. There needs to be a basic evil inclination, a basic Yetzer Hara for every sin, otherwise you don't have free will. If you don't want to do something wrong, then when you do the right thing, what free will are you exercising? Free will demands some pushback. If I don't have any internal struggle, I don't have free will at all. So for every single mitzvah, there has to be a little bit of pushback from the Yetzer Hara. However, that's just the baseline. Everybody has a Yetzer Hara, a kind of evil inclination inside them that is stronger than it is for other people. No two people have the same Yetzer Haras. And each person can look at their Yetzer Hara, and by figuring out what their strongest based urge is to do the wrong thing, can derive from there what their purpose is in this world, and thereby derive from there what they messed up last time. Meaning, if you want to know what mistake you made in your last life and why you're back here again, ask yourself, what is my greatest challenge? The Yetzer Hara tries very hard to make you mess up in the same area twice. Which means that the evil inclination ends up being a signpost. Our greatest struggles, our greatest challenges, end up being the best way to figure out what we're here for in the first place, to beat those. And I understand that's a little disappointing, because everybody would like a way out of their hardest ones, right? I'm really good at some things, can I just focus on those? Not really. The reason why my evil inclination is pushing me so hard in one or two specific areas is because that's why I'm here in the first place. There's a mimer from the Rebbe, Amar Rebbe Yechiel, that's a Yud Tes Kislev mimer, where the Rebbe makes a very similar point regarding the entire Jewish people. He says there that every generation has a Yetzer Hara for the entire generation. And that Yetzer Hara for the entire generation is an indication of the job of that generation. If you want to figure out what your generation's job is, all you have to do is ask yourself, what is the overwhelming evil inclination for most people in the generation? But obviously it applies to individuals too. One of the beautiful things about us each having different Yetzer Haras, as the Rebbe explains in that mimer, is that since we each have different Yetzer Haras, we can cover each other because we're really just one Jewish people. Which means that if I do a mitzvah that I'm good at, that I don't have much of an urge against, let's say that most of us, I don't know, there's certain things. I think probably most of us, at least I hope, don't struggle with murder all that much. If you do, please stay in the back of the room. Most of us don't want to kill anybody all that badly, except for sometimes in traffic. Most of us don't want to kill anybody that badly. There are some people in the world, some Jews in the world, unfortunately, who do have that Yetzer Hara, who very badly want to hurt somebody else. That's their Yetzer Hara. When you are excellent in not harming others, since we're all connected as one Jewish people, you, through the areas that are easy for you, help lessen the evil inclination of those who are struggling in a different area, which means the Jewish people cover each other specifically because we have different evil inclinations. But for our purposes, what's really interesting to know is that if I'm struggling with a certain mitzvah, that is my signpost. That's my way of knowing what I did last time and what I'm supposed to do this time. Let's continue reading the Rebbe. This is not so with matters that were lacking last time. Okay, there, the opposition of the evil inclinations in full force. Okay, let us not expand on something that has already been explained, etc. It's good advice, I should take it. With regard to you and practical action, which is the main thing, I once again draw your attention to and encourage you in increased effort in the area of peace of the home. So the Rebbe comes back to the beginning and says, remember Shalom Bayis? Let's go back to the beginning and make it real. Even if this entails yielding, since these concessions are not into matters of Torah and mitzvahs. So Rebbe says here, you're struggling with peace in the home, that's what you messed up last time. You and your wife had problems last time, that's why you're both back here again. By the way, it is mentioned in the works of the Arizal that most marriages happen every single incarnation. You married the same person every time. Wow, I didn't expect that reaction. Oh my goodness. You can tell the age of this is going to get me in trouble. I'll do it anyway. You can tell the age of your audience by how that one goes over. When I speak to seminary girls who are not yet married and I tell them this, they go, it's beautiful. It's incredible. You get to your soulmate. I tell it to anybody who's married for a few years, they start laughing and rolling their eyes. So you can age the crowd. Seminary girls think this is the most beautiful idea. I will say that I am very happily married, and I clearly have done this with my wife 3 or 4 times already, right? We've been incarnated together 3 or 4 times. I'm just saying, I would re-up. I would do it again. I would go another 4 with her. It's been fantastic. So I hope you feel that way about your spouse. That's the blessing you should give it a Sheva Brachas, right? Huh?
You gotta be imperfect to come back.
I didn't want to go into this, but I'm going to do it now because you forced my hand. The Rebbe mentions in a letter, and it's brought in the Arizal, but the Rebbe mentions it in a letter, that women, generally speaking, do not reincarnate. Wait, don't worry. You're going to reincarnate. Just give me a second. Women, generally speaking, don't reincarnate. And the reason why is because the horror of death, which is a scary and painful thing, and the initial moments after death tend to atone for most people's sins. Most people's sins are accomplished by the simple pain of death, the horror of death, and the transition which is so uncomfortable. That moment where a soul gets to the next world usually covers the vast majority of sins a person does, atones for them, and therefore most people go into the next world with very little baggage. Not you guys. Problem with men is that men have a mitzvah that you don't have. Everybody here has the mitzvah to learn Torah, otherwise I'd have an empty room. However, they have a mitzvah that they are never allowed to not learn Torah, and you're allowed to have free time. If there's a moment you're not studying Torah, it's not an Aveira. You get to choose when you study Torah. Gentlemen, as you probably know, if you're not working or taking care of your family or eating or sleeping or doing something that the body or the world needs, you have to study Torah, which means if you're on the couch, it's fine, and if you're on the couch, it's an Aveira every single second you're on that couch, unless you're using that energy to reinvest in Torah, which means, compared to the two sides of the room, who goes into the next world with more sins? Exponentially more, by definition. Now, if these two souls are together, a man, wait 1 second, if these two souls are together, a man can't come back without his soulmate. So the reason, you get it. So the reason you're here again is because of them. Your man brought you back. And so in answer to your question, the reason why we say that women don't really have reincarnation is that if a woman's husband doesn't mess up, she's probably not coming back. But if he messes up, she's going to get dragged back on his behalf again and again and again. So my wife has been here 4 times because of me. And yeah, you go ahead.
Does that mean that you're always a female or a male through every incarnation?
With very few exceptions. As we'll talk about in the regular reincarnation lecture, there are rare cases where a soul changes its gender or even changes from human to an animal to a rock, but those are considered severe punishments for severe sins. Generally speaking, everybody here is what they always have been.
Then how can you fulfill all the mitzvahs?
That's a great question. It's the kind of thing I want to talk about at the lecture, but it's something called Ibor. It's fascinating. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
Does that mean we're always responsible for our husbands?
Right. It means you should send them out of the house for Kollel at night unless you want to be here for a while, right? Unless you want to keep coming back, you better push them to learn Torah. You're probably familiar with the Gemara in Tractate Sota that says that women are protected by the fact that they stand by their door, shove their men out to learn Torah, and welcome them back from learning Torah. That is, the fact that women encourage men to learn Torah is where they get their merit from. Now you have a Kabbalistic twist on this. The only reason why you're back is because you didn't do it so well last time, clearly. So maybe it was partially your fault, but at the end of the day, that's what it means when Kabbalah says that women don't reincarnate. It means that they wouldn't reincarnate if it wasn't for...
Excuse me, what if you don't have a husband? You never have one.
What if your husband can't learn?
These are good things I'm going to have to save for the proper lecture. We do have these in the proper lecture. Today we're only focusing on the Rebbe's letters. And whatever we feel like. I know I'm making exceptions, but I'm looking at the clock. I do want to cover a little more material. I assume 11 o'clock's a hard stop, right? Even though we started 10 minutes late, I don't get anything back? No change? The rabbi went like this. That means I might get a little change. All right. I want to just add some things to this. I told you that the strongest hint for what you did in your past life, the strongest hint you're ever going to have, is what your Yetzer Hara is. However, there are other ones. The Rebbe mentions in some letters that talent is a hint about what God wants you to do in this life. If you find that you're uniquely good at something, that's where God wants you to invest your Jewish effort. That doesn't mean, God forbid, that a person should discover they're good at something and leave or sacrifice their Judaism over it. It means that they should serve God through the lens of what they're good at. I'm really good at screaming at crowds, and therefore I serve God this way. You figure out what your talent is. And a person's talent is a signpost that tells you this is what you didn't do so well in your last life and where I want you to focus in this life. So look for talents and double down on them. You have the Gra, the Vilna Gaon in Mishlei. He says that if you love a certain mitzvah, that also is an indication of what you did in your last life. I know I saw a letter from the Rebbe that says this, but try as I might, I wasn't able to find it and bring it on the sheet, so I'll tell it to you outside. This means that you have two forces inside you and they're both working for a common goal. The Yetzer Hara's job, the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, over on this side. Oh shoot, that probably made a very loud noise for the people at home. Just smacked my microphone. Over here, on the left side, the animalistic soul, its job is to try to make you mess up again. So it's going to give you a big evil inclination regarding what you messed up on last time. But at the same time, you have another buddy. You have your godly soul. You have your Yetzer Tov. You have your good inclination. What's it trying to do? It's trying to make sure you don't mess up again, which means that it's going to give you a very strong urge to do mitzvahs you missed out on last time, which means you can sort of follow your heart. Even though earlier I said following your heart is horrible, I changed my mind. You can sort of follow your heart. That is, that if you sense that there's a mitzvah you really don't want to do, or a sin you really want to do, definitely don't do that sin and definitely do that mitzvah, because the evil inclination is trying to mess you up again. But if you feel a strong pull toward a certain mitzvah, you're really attracted to a certain mitzvah, that's your godly soul saying, hey, we didn't do that one last time, let's do it now. which means you can follow your Yetzer Tov and ignore your Yetzer Hara and do the right thing. What I love about this is that it's a deeply Kabbalistic idea that's incredibly mystical, but it's the most practical advice you'll ever get from anybody. You know what I just said in Kabbalah words? Let's say it in normal English. Don't listen to your Yetzer Hara and do listen to your Yetzer Tov. You've heard this one before. It's the theme of Judaism. All we did was Kabbalah it up. There's also an Arizal that says that if there's a part of Torah that you really enjoy learning, a specific section of Torah, I don't know, you're just obsessed with Erchin or something, you're just obsessed with a particular area of Jewish law, that's an area of Jewish law you didn't study properly in your past life, and you should double down on your study of it. Okay. However, these are hints. Can I actually figure out my past life? I have a letter about it here. Make a long story short, no, you can't. Not really. Tzaddikim know. The Rebbe knows. Any real tzaddik, it's hard to find real tzaddikim. I don't know how you would tell if someone's a real tzaddik, because if I'm not a real tzaddik, how am I going to know if somebody else is? But if you were to meet a real tzaddik, they're able to figure out what your soul was doing last time. But as far as me and most of us in this room who might not be tzaddikim yet, we're unable to figure out what we were in our past lives. These ideas of visions and dreams that point us in that direction, that is not truth. That's not actual. That's something a tzaddik could inform us about. The Rebbe does say this in at least one place, so I have this in a sikha over here. From Shabbos Shuvah. The Rebbe says, based on this, it's understood how relevant it is in these times to study the revealed parts of the Torah together with its inner dimension. That is, study Nigla and study Chassidus. And not to suffice with having learned the inner dimension in a previous incarnation. A person can't say, hey, I'm going to study the Talmud this time around because I trust last time I studied Tanya. I probably did Tanya last time. Probably. It's not enough. First of all, one cannot know what one learned in a prior incarnation. How would you know? And even if one did know what was learned previously, Mashiach must come and be revealed now. Therefore, the study of the revealed Torah together with the inner dimension as preparation for becoming a Mashiach must take place now, in this incarnation specifically. So the Rebbe says, first of all, you have no way of knowing what you did last time. You have hints about your Yetzer Hara, your Yetzer Tov, but you're not going to know exactly where you were, so you can't hedge your bets. And second of all, in this life we have to do everything anyway, so don't use it as an excuse. But the point is, this is one of many letters where the Rebbe says you can't really figure out your past life. I have some primary sources on this. There's a Prima Gadim, he has a sefer called Sefer HaMagid, where he says that you could never know, God will never let a person know what they were in their past life. He would never let it happen. A tzaddik could reveal it, but God would never do it on his own. A tzaddik would have to decide it's good for you to hear. And the reason why is because if you found out that you did a bad job last time, you'll be sad all the time. And if you found out you did a good job last time, you're going to rest on your laurels and not do well. Which means that God has no incentive to mess you up by telling you about your past incarnation. There's a Pele Yates that says that Ben Adam Eina Zeichem El Gugul Makedem. It couldn't be more clear than that. A person, a human, cannot possibly remember any prior incarnation. He does give one fun exception though, and his fun exception is Yibum. Do we know what Yibum is? Levirate marriages, yeah? So if we have a husband and a wife, the husband dies. He has some brothers, the two of them had no kids. She, in theory, is supposed to marry one of her brothers-in-law. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore. That brother-in-law performs a ceremony with her called chalitza, which involves shoes and spitting. It's something nobody wants to see, but if it ever happens, it's worth seeing. And then she can marry anybody she wants. If she does marry that brother-in-law, then the Torah says that that's a way of keeping the brother's name, that her husband's name alive. And it's brought in many Kabbalah books, and the Pele Yates brings it as well, that is the only case where we know where an incarnation goes, that the dead husband absolutely reincarnates as that child. And the Pele Yates goes one step further. He says, not only is this child a clear reincarnation of the dead husband, this child should be told that, and should be told what his father was bad at last time, so that he hedges his bets this time around. So you tell the kid, hey, you are the clear incarnation of this guy. He was fantastic, but he spoke Lashon Hara like a maniac in the back of the shul all day, every day, just gossiping. Please keep your mouth shut. It's the Pele Yates says, let him know. But other than that, we don't let people know. Okay, I'm at my last letter. Do I have time to do? Yeah, I do. I'm actually doing fine for time. I can't believe it. Okay, I'm at my last letter that I want to show you, and then maybe we'll even have time for questions. Palaplois. This is my favorite letter in the entire Igros. It really is. I printed this out at one point and hung it up. It's my favorite letter. Because I think it's guidance for life in general, but it happens to be about reincarnation, so we're going to mention it here. But I think this is so important when it comes to discussions of Kabbalah, when it comes to discussions of Nistaris, of the hidden parts of the Torah. Chassidus is full of this stuff. And we are mystically inclined. It is very safe to say we are mystically inclined. But this is the guardrail that keeps you mystically inclined and keeps you honest. A Jew is not a flight off in the hills, fly off into a mountain, hum on a mountaintop mystic. We are incredibly practical mystics. We use mysticism for good and for making the world a better place, and otherwise we don't have much to do with it. We have zero interest in Torah that is not applicable. You know how I know that? Nasa v'nishma. We'll do, then we'll understand. Nishma, the study of Torah, is hinged on commitment to the practical. If I'm not interested in the Nasa, there's no room for me in the Nishma. So, this is a letter that keeps us grounded. Somebody wrote to the Rebbe, And I feel bad for our Rebbe sometimes. Also I don't feel bad. He's a tzaddik, he can handle it. Rebbe's he's a tzaddik, he can handle it. He's a big nasi, he's okay. But I do feel bad for him sometimes, I must say, because people write the most inane things to our Rebbe sometimes. And one of the inane things, by the way, speaking of inane things that I don't think are so inane, the Rabbi mentioned earlier that he asked for a bracha for Hatzlacha Muflaga, and that was a chutzpah. You told me that on the phone a couple days ago. As soon as you said that, I felt uncomfortable because I always ask the Rebbe for a bracha for Hatzlacha Muflaga when I write before a talk. So now I guess we're both the same kind of chutzpahdik. I don't know. I didn't think it was a chutzpah to ask for great Hatzlacha, but I do too. That's a thing that I think is okay to write to the Rebbe. You can write anything to the Rebbe. Please don't take me too seriously. You can always write to the Rebbe. The Rebbe loves letters. But somebody wrote to the Rebbe, who's a busy, busy man, who's running the entire world Jewry, and also is the collective soul of the entire Jewish people, who's responsible for driving us toward the coming of Mashiach through our own efforts, of course. And they write to him saying, Rebbe, I want to know where my soul comes from. He's got stuff to do. He's busy, man. Leave him alone. But anyway, this person writes to the Rebbe saying, I want to know what the root of my soul is on high. Tell me what I was last time. I want to know. I want to know what my past incarnation was. There's a whole book that came out somewhat recently on Holocaust reincarnations. Has any of you seen this book? Somebody put together a book. It's a thick book of people telling stories about how they're sure that they died in the Holocaust. Yeah. Is the author in the room? That will happen to me eventually, because I'm about to pan it. So prepare yourself. If you're the author of this book, I'm not a fan. Besides the fact that we have many sources we just read that made it clear that you couldn't possibly know your prior incarnation, that memories of having died in the Holocaust probably come from reading Anne Frank and watching movies. Besides that, let's be honest, most of the things people dream about are the things they saw during the day. It's a Gemara Maseches Brachas, plus it's basic neuro, right? We know that most of the things we dream about are stuff we saw during the day, and we see so much Holocaust paraphernalia, it's very hard to imagine that somebody dreaming they were in the Holocaust doesn't mean they saw a movie. But whatever, setting that aside, can anybody explain to me why a Kaddish would have to come back again for a second incarnation? Because I don't understand it. The claim in this book is that a bunch of people died al Kiddush Hashem and were so messed up they had to come back again. That doesn't sound right to me at all. It sounds to me like a fundamentally anti-Judaism. So I don't get it. For the record, several major Jewish organizations wrote nice reviews of this book. They're all wrong. Okay, you ask what is the root of your soul. They're allowed to be wrong. You ask what is the root of your soul on high. This person wants to know. Then the Rebbe says, it is known from the instruction of our Holy Torah that God did not create anything in His world, even a single thing, without a purpose. Which means that if I don't know something, I don't need to know it. That's what the Rebbe is about to imply. It means if I can't know something, I don't need it. Which means that if I was born and I lived my whole life and never know what I was last time, God would have given me that information if I needed it to be a good Jew. God gives me everything I need to succeed. This is a fundamental belief of the Jewish people. This is actually one of the areas in prayer that if you don't have proper intent for, you have to re-pray. There's 3 areas in the morning service that if someone doesn't have proper intent, they have to redo. Otherwise, we're allowed to just, turn off our brains and go. Not a great idea, but it's allowed. There are 3 places where you have to think. Number 1 is Pesach Yadecha must be in the middle of Ashrei. Number 2 is the first line of Shema. And number 3 is the first paragraph of the Shemona Esrei. In that section, Pesach Yadecha, in Ashrei, the basic kavanah, the basic intent that everybody must have is that God runs the entire world with hashgacha pratis. I have a phrase I circulate in my mind that captures this in a sentence to make sure I don't miss that part of davening. And it is that if I needed it, I would have it. And the fact that I don't have it means I don't need it. And the fact that I have it means I need it. That's what Pesach Yadecha means. I trust that God gives me the tools I need to succeed. Which means that if I would need to get a mystical intervention to find out what my soul was last time, I don't need it.
Why do we ask for things?
It's a great question. Ask me after. I'll answer that one first at the end of the lecture, okay? Hold on to it. Who asked it? Fantastic question. Please hold it. And honestly, it's one of the biggest questions in the entire study of Bitachon. Right? If you read the Sha'ar Bitachon forward and backward, that's the question that comes to the surface. Why ask for anything? God's got me. So we'll talk about it right after. It's a fantastic question. It is a mitzvah to ask. That's probably the best answer. But I'll give you a fuller answer in a second, okay? It's a very good question. Okay, this applies as well to the knowledge a person must acquire, namely matters upon which his Torah mitzvahs and the manner of their fulfillment depend. Meaning, everything that I need to know to be a successful Jew is in the code of Jewish law, is in the Talmud, is in Tanya. If it's not written down somewhere, a way to find out what I was last time, then clearly I don't need it. Now the Rebbe goes on to say, with regards to you, this is my favorite line in the entire Igris. I want to read it in the Hebrew. Regarding you, what practical difference would it make if I told you? This person writes to the Rebbe and says, what was I last time? And the Rebbe goes, I know. Why would I tell you? Why would I tell? What are you going to do with this information? I just explained to you that if you needed it, you'd know it already. Which means you're not going to gain anything by this information at all. So what, common curiosity? That's what you're writing to me about? A Jew with simple curiosity, with no interest in practically implementing the result of that curiosity? That's not Jewish. So the Rebbe says, the onus is on you. You write back to me. You write back to me and explain how your life as a Jew practically will be better if I tell you this information. If you can't do that, it's not for you. You want proof? You don't know it already. Mysticism, the secrets of the Torah, the study of reincarnation, Kabbalah, Hasidus, all of Torah. It's fascinating, I guess. It is. But you know, the argument that Torah's academic interest is enough and that we don't need a practical output from it is the entire story of Hanukkah. When the Yevanim came against us, they said, study Torah all you want, but don't forget, make sure it's not God's Torah. Don't you tell me that you're going to study in order to practically implement. Don't tell me that you're studying Torah to serve God. Tell me that reincarnation is a fascinating topic that interests you out of simple curiosity. Tell me that your human curiosity extends to the sciences, and extends to the Talmud, and extends to Kabbalah, because Torah is interesting. Tell me that, said the Yevanim in the Hanukkah story, and we're fine. The Jewish people fought and died for the idea that that's not what Torah is. So says the Rebbe, you tell me what you're going to do with it. You tell me what you would do with this information. You have the code of Jewish law. In the code of Jewish law is written every single thing you need to do. You have everything you need in the code of Jewish law. Why are you busy in hidden matters that you don't need? I'm adding the words that you don't need. Says the Rebbe, people waste so much of their time in the pointless mysticism, which is not the same as the practical implementation of the study of Kabbalah and the mysteries of the Torah. A person who studies Tanya, a person who studies Chassidus, a person who studies Kabbalah, a person who studies Gilgulim, or any of these topics, with the intent of using it to better their lives, to make themselves better Jews, to increase in their adherence of Torah and mitzvahs, in their faith in God, in their faith that God runs the world, and He's responsible for making sure that everything that He wants actually happens, even if it takes many, many cycles. If that's the way you're studying it, fantastic. But any questions we have in the hidden parts of the Torah that we can't explain practically what we would do with them, Ein lanu esek b'nistaris. What are we doing in them in the first place? Somebody writes to the Rebbe saying, I want to know what I was in my past life, and the Rebbe says back, L'may nafkamina hare lefanecha shulchan aruch. What do you need? You need the code of Jewish law. Why aren't you asking me about that? Which means after a whole discussion of Gilgulim, the big question is, who cares? And the answer is, there's a lot of room to care. This is the Holy Torah. It's God's holy ideas and God's holy word. This is the will and wisdom of God Almighty. It's worth studying. It tells us about divine justice. It tells us that God cares about each of us individually, and that God will make sure to bring us back again and again until we get it right. It tells us that every single moment we live in this world is an opportunity to self-actualize, not just this life, but many lives before. It tells me what I'm doing here, and it gives me faith, it gives me promise, it gives me hope. It makes me understand that I'm living right now in the same generation that left Egypt, and that I'm going to see those same wonders once again with the coming of Mashiach. That's the way to study the books of reincarnations. The Sefer al-Gilgul, the Shar al-Gilgulim of the Arizal. However, to study it for the selfish purpose of satisfying my own curiosity and trying to figure out what I was last time around without any practical hope of doing anything with it is un-Jewish. And there's a fine line here, and the Rebbe draws it very clearly. Okay, thank you all very much. I owe you an answer to your question, but we can talk about it after.